Hello and welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at BChad50. And for once, well, I won't say for once, but it's been a while since we had a big slate like this on a Saturday. You were mentioning it earlier. Usually we get a nice little medium-sized slate early and then a smaller slate at night, but not the case tonight. At least we have some good pitchers, some good matchups. Actually, quite a few pitchers that I feel at least somewhat comfortable with tonight. So, starting off at the top, of course, you've got Chris Archer at $11,400. He's facing off against a Texas team that hits righties very well. It's in Texas. Obviously, Archer with a massive strikeout upside. He's got a strikeout rate of over 30% of the season, 33% over the last 30 days. But you said it before the show, and I tend to agree. I don't like targeting guys, especially righties, in Texas. So that's not to say that Archer couldn't go out and have an absolute gem today. But he's not a cash game option for me. For me, he's a high upside GPP guy.
Yeah, I'm reserving them for GPPs. I think we have alternatives that are a little bit safer, a little bit higher floor, in better pitching environments than Archer is in. So I'm with you. The upside's very high anytime you get Chris Archer with the baseball in his hand because the strikeout upside's so high. But as far as using him in cash games, it's a pretty steep price for a guy at a hitter-friendly ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, then, you're basically making your decision on your cash games between Jake Arrieta and Johnny Cueto. I slightly prefer Arrieta just because he's going against the White Sox, who obviously are a terrible offense. Although the Angels have not been a very good offense recently either. They've been mowed down by some far inferior pitchers than Johnny Cueto. So it's tough here because I'm looking at it. There's really not a whole lot to separate the two guys. Both guys solid strikeout rates. Arrieta slightly higher strikeout rate. Been fairly, I guess you could say, more consistent over the last couple of months. But then I guess you're going to take your pick on which offense you feel like picking on. And, I mean, you've obviously got Cueto pitching at home, well, his new home against the Angels, or U.S. Cellular, not necessarily a place you want to target pitchers. So maybe for that reason you lean Cueto. Which way are you leaning here?
I'm leaning Cueto ever so slightly, and I think one of the key determining factors is definitely the ballpark. You mentioned U.S. Cellular Field being homer-friendly, but also, the Angels have been literally the worst offense in baseball over the last 2 weeks. So, if you're talking about really poor current form, it doesn't get any poorer than the Angels have showcased of late. And looking at the Vegas lines right now, I got Pinnacle open, and we're looking at minus 158 for Johnny Cueto. Jake Arrieta checks in at just minus 118. So that's just one more notch in the I guess in the pros column for using Cueto instead of Arrieta. Both are, I'm in agreement, they're your top two cash games options, but I'm going to lean ever so slightly. And with just a $500 price gap, that's pretty easy to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead and give you a couple other pitchers that I'm looking at here. You tell me if you like them, you don't, then throw in your guys. We'll try to keep this fairly short for everyone because there's quite a few guys I'm at least considering here. I like John Lackey as a cash game option. Obviously not a huge upside GPP guy, but 8,500 against Miami. I think is a fine option. Jimmy Nelson, a guy that's been pitching really well at 8K, facing off, as we know, an inconsistent Philly offense. They haven't necessarily been bad, but Nelson's been showing his upside too. He's got three games with 8 strikeouts in his last 5. And then going down a little bit more, two guys I like in GPPs. Chris Bassett against Baltimore had a huge game against them 2 starts ago. He's been very good over the past month. And then Patrick Corbin. We know I have an affinity for Patrick Corbin. Atlanta does not hit lefties well. They also don't strike out a lot, but at $6,700, you don't need this guy to go out and get you 7 or 8 Ks tonight.
Yeah, really nice matchup plus price point for Corbin. I like that quite a bit. You point out Nelson's good strong run, and I know a lot's been made of the Phillies coming out of the All-Star break as one of the hotter teams and winning a lot of games, but looking at their last 30-day and last 2-week hitting numbers, they're really still just a middle-of-the-pack offense, so they're not anybody that you really need to go running scared from. And you'd expect them to get some run support facing off against Jerome Williams, so I like that as well. A couple other names I'm going to stick in there. Justin Verlander against Houston Astros. I didn't think I'd see the day where I would be touting Justin Verlander again, but in his last 4 starts, he's really only got one messy turn, and he still went 7 innings and struck out 5, but Beyond that, we've got 2 8-inning starts and a 6-inning start in which he allowed 7 base runners and struck out 7. So double-digit points on FanDuel in 3 of his last 4 starts, and seems to be figuring it out. And the Astros, they are a potent offense definitely, but you could take a chance at 7,700 on Verlander showing up strong again, and you can get a lot of bats in there with the $7,700 pitcher. And then one other name I'll throw out there, the ceiling isn't super exciting, but Brett Anderson's at home. Should get some run support against David Holmberg tonight. And he's been pretty much rock solid tonight. He's kind of been lackey-like in that you're not getting a lot of strikeouts. He's pounding the strike zone. You're hoping for innings pitched and a win. And if he gives you that, he's going to deliver on his $7,200 price tag. But not the highest of ceilings. Usually you like a little bit higher in GPPs, but you can make up for that by grabbing some higher ceiling bats instead.
Yeah, and we have seen, I mean, he has shown his upside at times. I mean, he had back-to-back starts against Arizona and Miami where he had 17 strikeouts over 14 innings. So, I mean, it's there. It's just not, you're not expecting it, I guess. And but I'm with you there. I think he's got a nice high floor tonight for cheap. All right, moving on to catcher, where I guess we just have to mention Kyle Schwarber anytime that he's playing ever because the guy's absolutely on fire. $4,200, though, is very pricey, and it is a lefty-lefty matchup, so you don't love those factors, but I feel like he's going to be one of those guys whose ownership is artificially inflated just because of his recent form. Buster Posey, though, of course, you're considering him against a lefty. It's a good lefty in Gio Gonzalez, but Gio isn't the best against right-handed batters either. Been better recently, but still 326 WOBA on the season is not great. Obviously, Buster Posey, you take his side against the lefty more often than not. But the guy that I'm looking at, and I know you're looking at as well as your cash game play, it's got to be John Jaso at $2,500. Facing off against Colby Lewis. We know the drill with Colby Lewis. He struggles against left-handed batters. Not quite as much this season, 328 WOBA, but certainly a guy that's exploitable. And Jaso's been hitting the ball really well since he came out.
Yeah, it gets a nice park factor boost playing at Arlington, Ranger Stadium in Arlington. So I like that quite a bit as well. One other name I'll throw out there is Victor Martinez. We like him better against lefties than righties, but maybe he's rejuvenated with Miguel Cabrera back in the lineup. More importantly, he's at Minute Maid Park, which is a nice ballpark for power and for run scoring. So Colin McHugh's been pitching well lately, but he's not missing bats like he was last year. And, I mean, if you're pitching to contact, Victor Martinez is one of those hitters that you don't really want making a lot of contact with your pitches. He tends to do a little bit of damage when he's making contact. So I do like Victor Martinez just a bit.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those bats that you don't expect to miss that bat because he does not strike out a whole hell of a lot.
No.
Stephen Vogt also, if you wanna go down that route, did homer last night. He's still absolute bare minimum salary. Gets a righty at Camden Yards. We know he has the upside here, and very little risk, obviously, being minimum salary. So he's certainly in play.
Yep.
First base, the triumphant return of Miguel Cabrera last night, 0 for 3 with a walk. Guess we'll give him a pass on his first start, especially against Dallas Keuchel. Now gets an okay pitcher, like you mentioned, in Colin McHugh, but also not missing many bats. And this is a bat you certainly want to miss because one of the best hitters in all of baseball. So he's certainly in play. Chris Davis, once again, got it done last night. I'm not in love with a lot of the Orioles because I do like Chris Bassett as a GPP option, but Chris Davis and the guy on the other corner of the infield, the two guys I'm looking at here, with some big-time upside. But first base options, if you're going to go paying down, my favorite option in the middle ground there is going to be Adam Lind against Jerome Williams. Obviously, we know Adam Lind, one of the best in the game against right-handed pitching, and Jerome Williams, one of the worst in the game against, pretty much everyone. So I'm going to be targeting him where I can. And Adam Lind at $3,500, especially at home, gives you quite a bit of upside. I think a nice floor, too.
Yeah, really great ballpark for him. Miller Park is so awesome for offense. A few more names I'll throw out there. Eric Hosmer gets Matt Shoemaker. Anytime you can get a guy against a fly ball pitcher like Shoemaker, obviously fly balls have a lower batting average on balls in play than any other ball, but I mean, they're your damage balls, and Eric Hosmer can put a charge into one. So if you're looking for home run potential, get a guy against a fly ball pitcher like Shoemaker, and Hosmer makes quite a bit of sense. Also looking at Carlos Santana on a few teams. Not a lot of left-handed bats to target against Tyler Duffy. Wanted to call him Danny momentarily, just because Danny Duffy's been in the league longer. But Tyler Duffy, I'll grab some Carlos Santana shares. I don't like him quite as much here because he's only first base eligible, but I do think he's at least something of a contrarian play because he should be low owned. Nobody's typically looking to use Santana at first base anyway. And another name that I like on the cheap, based on a really interesting quote on the MLB Probables page, Joe Mauer against Josh Tomlin. You don't usually see managerial quotes on the player's probable page. Usually it's something about how they've done recently. Well, Tomlin hasn't pitched yet this year in the big leagues. And there's a quote from Terry Francona that says that his velocity is just not where it was pre-surgery. And it's just like, wait a second, that's not the kind of like flowery stuff we're used to on MLB.com. So kind of strange. And Tomlin wasn't exactly a great pitcher prior to his injury anyway. So if he's out there throwing beach balls, I want some Twins against him.
Yeah, and I mean, Mauer, after slow starts of season power-wise, I mean, he's up to 8 home runs, which isn't great. But I mean, I want to say he only had 1 over the first month and a half or something like that. So homered last night. He's a guy that's been showing a little bit of power. I'll mention one more guy here, and it's Ryan Howard. Jimmy Nelson does have one big weakness, and it's against left-handed batters, 357 WOBA. We know Ryan Howard, certainly not a guy you would ever play in a cash game, but is as big of bat as anyone as you're going to find here around that price range.
Yep.
All right, second base options. I'll let you go ahead and take the lead here with your favorite player.
I'm going to go back to the Twins well, and I'm going to say Brian Dozier, $3,500. He's got power. If Tomlin's not throwing with the same stuff that he had pre-injury, then that's going to be problematic for him. And, I mean, granted, even if Tomlin was throwing with pre-surgery stuff, I'd still like a number of these Twins. Yep. They're at home. They are better at home. Dozier, we know he's much better against lefties and righties, but he still has some big power against righties. Not quite the as well-rounded a offensive profile, but still hits for power against righties. So I like Dozier quite a bit. And then it's really a punt position mostly for me. I'm looking down at Chase Utley on the cheap at $2,400. I'm looking at Scooter Gennett against at $2,200 against Jerome Williams, and then not a heck of a lot else. I mean, it's not a position that's loaded with great options and great situations and great lineup spots or ballparks. There's just not a ton to like here. I mean, this is probably the worst position at Coors Field, too. I mean, we're talking about DJ LeMahieu and I believe... yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, like... yeah, Jed Jerko, second base eligible. Had to double check and make sure that that's where they gave him eligibility. I know he's played some third at times, but Jed Jerko coming off of a big game, but it's a righty-righty matchup. I think you're going to see people mistakenly chase his numbers from yesterday, but I'm not going to be one of those people.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the cheap guys there. Both those guys in play for me. And then another cheap option, Enrique Kike Hernandez.
Yes.
He's got really good numbers against lefties this year. Back-to-back 3-hit games. Not usually a guy that's going to flash a ton of power, but I mean, in a small sample size, 141 at-bats, he does have 5 homers, 10 doubles, and 2 triples. So, you know, one of those guys that kind of can sneak up on you and put up a big number for cheap. All right, third base options. I mean, for me, it's Nolan Arenado at the top. We saw that torrid stretch he had there for a couple weeks. What was it, in July, I believe, and then kind of struggled a little bit. But now over his last 7 games, 3 homers, 2 of them in his last 2 games. Stole a base last night, too. Had a huge game. Now he gets Andrew Kashner, who is much better against righties than lefties, but this is still Coors Field. Tend to think that the lefties in this lineup are going to be able to get on base. We'll get to them in a minute. Ahead of Arenado, going to be some ducks on the pond, as you like to say, and we know what kind of power this guy possesses. Actually hitting righties better than lefties so far this season, which is different than what he was doing last year.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to want Coors Field action tonight. You're going to want the Rockies side of things, and obviously Arenado is a huge piece in that. I'm also looking at Miguel Sano, going right back to the Twins against the Indians. Sano's been excellent. If you're not missing his bat, he's doing damage and ripping the cover off of baseball. So really like Sano quite a bit. Like Todd Father against Brett Anderson at Chavez Ravine at Dodger Stadium. And then Matt Duffy against lefty Gio Gonzalez. Duffy coming off of a big game last night. 3 hits, a double, a homer, 3 ribos. Walk. I mean, Duffy's settled in as their 3-hitter, and he's been fantastic. And he is a right-handed batter, so he's going to hold that platoon advantage over Gio.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I also like Manny Machado. Kind of mentioned him a little bit earlier with Chris Davis. And then if you want the swerve off Miguel Sano, he hasn't been hitting nearly as well. But the other Twins third baseman, who does have some power himself, Trevor Plouffe, you can almost guarantee that we're going to see almost 3 times as much ownership, at least I would say, for Miguel Sano. So if you're trying to be contrarian, he's not an option where you're being contrarian just to be contrarian. I mean, the guy still has some power. And then speaking of a little bit of power for cheap, Mike Moustakas against your fly ball pitcher and Matt Shoemaker. We know he gives up when he's bad, he gets crushed. And then my obligatory Lonnie Chisenhall mention, he did have 3 hits and a stolen base last night. So at 2,300, maybe you don't want to play him, but I'm gonna be there when he gets his next big league homer.
And I mean, if you're gonna bet on him getting a big league homer against somebody, recent big league promotion, Tyler Duffy doesn't seem like a bad place to start.
No, not at all. So I'll be looking for that tonight. And shortstop, as always, there's no Troy Tulowitzki, so it's Carlos Correa and it's everybody else. He gets Justin Verlander, who, as you mentioned, has been better, but still a reverse splits type pitcher over the past few years. Correa only makes one kind of contact, and that's hard contact. And he's been patient at the plate. Last night, walked 3 times, stole a base. So even without getting big hits, he's still getting it done. And I know there's a guy a few spots below him that you really like tonight as well.
Yeah, Jung-Ho Kang gets a lefty tonight, and John Neese. And Gang's been good against everybody, but he's been better against lefties than righties this year, as you'd expect. And because he's right-handed, we know Neese has a traditional platoon split, better against lefties than righties. So Gang's going to hold the platoon advantage all the way around, and he's just been so good and so consistent since he's basically taken the everyday role with the injury to Josh Harrison and to some of the other Bucks. And love Gang tonight, but also like Brandon Crawford. Remember the reverse platoon splits for him. Easy to overlook these lefty-lefty matchups, but Crawford has been better against lefties than righties over the last couple years, and has some power. So I think that he's a decent play, and because he's at home, because AT&T Park does suppress home runs, I think you're going to see his ownership deflated quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that's a great call. And then there's another guy who just continues to mash the ball right now, and that's Asdrubal Cabrera. You don't like his price tag, but I keep saying this is, I don't think, a fluke. This is a guy that was a good hitter with the Cleveland Indians before and just struggled at the beginning of this year. 9 of his last 10 games, he has multi-hit games, and a double in 5 of those, homer in 1 of them. So, I mean, he's a guy who's showing a little bit of upside as well. Like I said, you hate the price, but you know he's going to have low ownership with the other guys we mentioned around that price.
Yeah, and I think my cash games play at the position is going to be $2,700 Johnny Peralta. I mean, he's rock steady throughout his career, for goodness sakes, but he's been good again this year. He hits in the heart of that Cardinals order. Just $2,700 against a lefty, a subpar lefty in Brad Hand. So I do like Johnny Peralta quite a bit, and offers you some serious savings from the top options at the position. Yeah,
certainly. And then, of course, as your cheap options, we'll mention them for you. Alcides Escobar is a guy you always look at, but we now have another option that I like down there, especially against Jerome Williams. John Segura, $2,300, should be leading off. Even if he's not leading off, you imagine he'll be near the heart of that order, just because, I mean, the bottom of that order is just, it's garbage now with all the guys sent out of town.
Yeah.
So he's almost by default promoted himself up in the order, even though he hasn't been particularly great. All right, outfield options. Carlos Gonzalez has got to be your top option at $4,900 at Coors Field against Andrew Cashner, who is a fine pitcher, but he's not a fine pitcher against lefties. 388 WOBA allowed, 12 homers this year. Would be surprised to see that 12 not turn into at least a 13 by the end of tonight. Carlos Gonzalez, definitely the power to take him deep. We know what kind of run he's been on, and struggled over his past 4 starts, I guess, but we know he has just as good a chance as anyone to put 1, even 2 in the seats tonight. So you got to like him. His teammate Charlie Blackmon, of course, in the same boat. Not quite the power that Cargo has, of course, but 31 stolen bases in case you haven't noticed. Charlie Blackmon has a ridiculously high floor in this matchup.
Yeah, gotta love both of those plays. A couple pivots off of them in GPPs that I like are $5,100 Andrew McCutchen against a lefty, one of the best hitters in baseball against lefties. Gets Jonathan Neese tonight. And then Bryce Harper is the exact same price as Charlie Blackmon. He went deep yesterday. He gets PV. PV not we're not talking peak years. NL Cy Young, Jake Peavy. He's been good, but he's not missing bats like he did in his heyday. And if you're not missing Bryce Harper's bat, you're just asking for trouble, basically. You can play the Padres outfield bats, but I don't love the price points on either. You're going to see a lot of people chase Kemp's big game last night. And John Gray has been pretty good in both of his big league starts, was very good in the AAA level before getting his promotion. Some other names that I am looking at, though, are David Peralta, who you and I talked about before the podcast. Really got to take advantage of that Mike Foltynewicz platoon split. He is bad against left-handed batters, and when I say bad, I mean horrific against them. So you're going to want to grab some shares of him. I also like Preston Tucker at 3,100. Looks pretty good. He's continuing to hit in the heart of that Astros order. He's hit cleanup at times. He hit second the other day, and of late, anywhere in that top four is pretty good for that now high octane Astros offense that I like quite a bit. And then looking a little bit deeper, I'll take it from you so you don't seem like a homer. Don Brown against Jimmy Nelson, $2,800. Good price point for him. Great ballpark factors at Miller Park. Gets that platoon advantage against Jimmy Nelson. As you've noted, Jimmy Nelson's the fly in the ointment with him is that he struggles mightily with left-handed batters. And then speaking of lefties, we love lefties at Camden Yards. My favorite bargain play of the day, $2,300 Josh Reddick against Miguel Gonzalez at Camden Yards. I can't see myself getting away from that.
No, that's going to be tough. I mean, it's a good spot for him. A couple other middle guys that I like Dexter Fowler. It is a tough matchup against Jose Quintana, but as a GPP play, I love him because he can do it all. In his last 2 games, he's got 2 doubles, a triple, a home run, 2 walks, steals the occasional base, 17 on the season. So, guy that can do it all. Aaron Hicks, once again, picking on your favorite of the night, Josh Tomlin. And, I mean, we have to mention Gregory Polanco because he just continues to put up solid numbers. He's hitting for some power now. It is lefty matchup, but Clayton Kershaw didn't fare too well in that either. So certainly a guy that's still in play. And then as you're looking for cheaper guys, righty-righty matchup you don't love, but you do love the power upside, and you love the guy throwing the baseball, and that's Jerome Williams. So Chris Davis, baby crush at 3,000. Homered again last night. I mean, he's an all-or-nothing type of play, as you know by now, but certainly a guy that possesses quite a bit of upside. And should be fairly low owned, I would imagine, tonight in that righty-righty matchup with the Coors Field game on a full slate. And then one more guy, Abraham Almonte, $2,700. You and I were talking before the show briefly about this. Don't really know where it came from. This guy, I mean, he gets promoted, and over his last 6 games, he's got 2 homers, 4 doubles, a triple. I mean, he's kind of doing it all. Been batting right around 6th or 7th, and we mentioned Tyler Duffy, not a pitcher that anyone's afraid of tonight.
Yeah, and I'll throw one more name in there. Same price point as Abraham Almonte. Cue Scott Van Slyke's music. He gets the lefty David Holmberg tonight. Holmberg not missing many bats. Van Slyke, that fly ball swing is built for Dodger Stadium, and do like him getting a lefty tonight.
Yeah, I wonder what his walk-up music actually is.
Yeah, that'd be interesting
that.
now.
I'll have to Google that and figure it out. But either way, thanks for hanging out with us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.